Next month, you're going to be one of the newest inductees in Musicians Hall of Fame at our induction ceremony.
That's going to be an awesome experience. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, we are too. It's always a lot of fun, and it's not just, a lot of people think because we're in Nashville it's just country music, but it's, one time before we had Dick Dale, we inducted Dick in I think it was 2008 or 9, I forgot now. So it's fun to have some surf music back into the...
Well, surf music is one of those kind of things that makes people happy when they hear it because it's exciting. It was originally dance music. And so when people want to get up and dance, that's the kind of music I love to hear.
Most every musician wants to know, how did you get started?
Well, when I was 8 years old, my parents gave me a beautiful silver-toned acoustic guitar with the strings about that high off the neck. And that was my dad's guitar. But really it wasn't until I was 13, in 1960, my dad took myself, my mom, and my older sister to Hawaii. And we proceeded to go to the Kaiser Hawaiian Village Hotel. And then that night we went to a Hawaiian luau show. And about halfway through, a gentleman came out with an ukulele. And I looked at my dad and I said, "Dad, I want to do that." We finally got home and went to a little music store there in Glendora, California, where we lived, and went up to the counter and said to the man, I'd like to learn more about ukulele. And they said, "Well, we don't have an ukulele teacher, but we have a guitar teacher." I went back in the back and there was this beautiful lady who had a blonde Telecaster. And she said, "Well, we're going to learn to read music." And I said, "Well, that's cool," because I hadn't had that opportunity yet. And the first 2 weeks she had me already doing recitals. I'm in 7th grade when I first start. And then in 8th grade, we had a talent show. And in that same show, another act that came up right after me was Jim Fuller and Pat Conley. So they played together and borrowed my equipment. That was kind of how I got started really getting excited about the guitar.
How did the Surfaris, how did it happen?
So what happened was Jim Fuller, Pat Conley, the two members of the Surfaris, played instruments, came over to my house, and we sat there in the early afternoon and played every song. I played a lot of Ventures, and Jim Fuller knew the whole Dick Dale catalog, so we kind of backed each other up on these songs, and Pat was playing my Telecaster, trying to play bass. He never had a bass, but he kept playing along. And we said, "Okay, that's really great, guys. Thanks for coming over." They said, "Well, hang on a second, Bob. We've got a concert tonight. Would you like to go and play with us?" I said, "Wow, okay, where is it?" He said, "Well, it's at Pomona Catholic High School, and it's going to be an after football game in the gym." But I said, "We don't have a drummer." "Well, we're going to meet the drummer there." So, here's a band that's going to show up and play for the first time with a drummer who doesn't know any of your songs. You don't know what he plays like or anything. But there was Ron Wilson, the drummer on Wipeout, setting his drums underneath the basketball net, because they didn't swing it up out of the way. They just set us up. He had a Ludwig set, like a 3-piece type set, very simple. And we started playing, and the crowd loved it and said, "Hey, we want to hear more of that." So that's how the band started.
What was the next progression after that? You started having band practice, you started getting booked for gigs. When did you start writing songs? What was the progression?
Well, what happened was that Jim Fuller and Pat Conley and I knew a man named Dale Smallin. He was my scoutmaster when I was about 12. They said, "We know Dale Smallin. He's gonna help manage us." I said, "Okay, cool." So we went over to his. He had a video studio and photography studio in Azusa, California. So my dad drove us all over there with my equipment one night. We set up in there, and Ronnie showed up, and we started rehearsing in his studio. And we did that from September, October, and then about the 1st of November, he said, "Hey, I've got some gigs. Why don't we play this gig?" So it was a teen center in those days. Mm-hmm. So we started playing some small teen centers. And then one night, Ron Wilson comes into the rehearsal and goes, "Hey, Bob, I had a dream about a song called Surfer Joe." And we go, "Wow, that's cool," because we'd never written a song before. And Ronnie goes in the drums, just starts playing the drums. And I said, "Well, we better come up with a key and an arrangement." So I started in G, started playing this arrangement for Surfer Joe. And he starts singing the song. We get the verse down and the chorus down. And after we had 5 verses of this song, got it all up. And then Ronnie said, "I need some help in the final couple of verses." So we kind of sit down then and kind of wrote up the last final couple of verses where Surfer Joe joins Uncle Sam's Marines today. So we got that stuff done. And then we got it all done, and our manager, Dale, goes, hey, that's a cool song. It's kind of a Beach Boy kind of thing. Why don't we go and record it? We go, cool. We're going to go to Hollywood. He said, well, not really. You guys can't afford that. So anyway, we end up showing up in my driveway one night, December of 1962. So we've been playing since September, October, and November. In December of 62, Ron Wilson, Pat Conley, and Jim Fuller show up in my driveway, and Dale Smollin's there. He says, okay, boys, let's go, but we need some money. I ask everybody, well, do you have any money? And everybody goes, no. He says, well, if you don't have $150, we're not going. So I went, well, I went in the house and I asked my mom for $150 right there. And you know, $150 in 1962 was like 2 weeks' wages for an average worker. And so my mom brought out her Western Bank checkbook in blue and wrote out a check for $150, wrote it out to Dale Smallin. I took it out and said, okay, boys, we're going. And we drive on out. And we're going, instead of turning left on Highway 66 to go to LA, we turn right to go to Cucamonga. It's an old shoe store with the glass on the sides. And we knock on the door, and it's like inner sanctum, this squeaky door opens up, and there's this little guy, looks like a leprechaun, and his name was Paul Buff. Found out later that he was kind of the godfather of music, of surf music recording, because he was the guy, he was cheap, and he would get the job done, and he played his studio like he was the instrument. He made all his own equipment. He was an ex-Marine trained on electronics. He built his own studio, built his own equipment, had his own lathe with a vacuum sweeper on it to pull the chips off when it went around. He made his console out of his mother's boudoir dresser. He brought that in and made his own console. So it was a real advanced studio, man. I mean, it was like ancient looking, but it worked. You know, he knew how to make it. It was a 1/4 inch reel to reel going on in monaural. It wasn't even stereo. So here we are mixing basically 3 tracks down to 1 to get a master. So anyway, we get in, we set up, and here comes Pat Conley, walks in with a bass guitar. I go, where'd you get that? He said, well, I borrowed it from my cousin. It's the first night he ever played bass guitar. So we started playing Surfer Joe, the vocal, right? But we didn't play vocal. Ronnie kind of mouthed the words and we followed along, got the track done for that. And then Ronnie goes over to the microphone, which was set up in the other side of the room, and he plays the track back and Ronnie sings Surfer Joe.